My name is Suzanne Balet-Haight from Ballet Flowers and Design. We've been in business since 95, but a lot of you might know me from the farmers market. We've been going to the farmers markets since 1978. Today is exciting. There we go. We're going to talk about native plants for your garden. And I think a lot of you are probably plant enthusiasts for many, many years. I've been interested in plants for over 40 years, studying at different times, whether it was at the farmer's market or 4-H, or I went to SUNY Cobleskill and Cornell University for horticulture as well. And through the years, you learn certain aspects of flowers and plants and how they grow, and some of it's in school and classroom experience, but a lot of it is hands-on knowledge as you go through the years. So the native plants, it has been a little bit new to me, probably in the last 5 to 10 years. And I find that in a lot of the gardenscapes that we've worked on, we've incorporated a lot of native plants, but I didn't really think about it as a native plant originally. I thought about, okay, I want to design a garden with beautiful color and some splash, and what's going to give you color throughout the season. So that's kind of the way I've thought about gardening more in the past. But now I think about it in a lot of different ways. So native plants can be fantastic for the environment and the ecosystem. And as you plant native plants, it's more than just the beauty of a flower per se, but it's the whole experience that it creates. So native plants are healthier for our environment. They're beautiful, usually easier maintenance. And as I think about like incorporating native plants into my garden or other people's gardens, I look at nature as it is. So as you take hikes or you're enjoying the woods, maybe it's Saratoga Springs State Park, just walking through. This is a picture. We went for a canoe paddle on Putnam Pond this past weekend. And I took a few pictures because I'm like, you know what do I really enjoy in nature? And how would I want to incorporate that into another person's garden? So I look at this picture and I see the different colors of leaves, the red maple, the color of the white birch, the color of the rock next to it, the different shades of greens and textures of leaves. So I can kind of look into this arrangement, and the rock is kind of a focal point, as well as the birch stand. So as I come back to my nursery, I think, okay, I love being outdoors, and how do I incorporate what I see in nature into a garden? So I want to think about what is out there in the wild and incorporating it back into our cultivated gardens. So you want to create a healthy ecosystem from the bottom up. And that means the leaves fall to the ground, and maybe you want to leave those leaves at the base. And it creates an environment for the insects and caterpillars to rejuvenate themselves, and that creates food for the birds. And then it just kind of cycles along the way, and the seeds might germinate and form new plants. So it kind of like creates this whole ecosystem that works together. It also provides food and pollination. Birds, butterflies, and bees, but also humans. You know, we eat some of the wild plants that are out there as well. What thrives in ideal soil and water and light, different plants in the native environment in our area. Some will grow in sandy conditions, some will grow in wet conditions. You kind of analyze what you already have and then incorporate the right plants for that setting. And native plants also can be easier maintenance. So as you are designing a garden, maybe it's not a whole bunch of mulch in between each of the plants, but it's the leaf litter is falling to the ground. It's mulching the plants along the way, or you have plants that have self-seeded and it forms a cluster of them in an area and you don't need as much mulch because of it. We developed a little garden plan of native plants, but I wanted to kind of specify the difference. There's true native plants and there's nativars. So the nativars are cultivars of the natives. So there are, I guess, like penstemon, that could be an example, and you have the variety Husker's Red. But Husker's Red wasn't the original variety of native plant. So you have to think about, okay, do you want a true native garden, or do you want to incorporate a few cultivars of the natives? So I just want to, it's sometimes hard to find all true natives, but you can find cultivars of those native plants that can act in the same ways. They can create pollination for the birds and the bees and food source. I wanted to talk about a couple different plants that are natives and or nativars that you can incorporate into your garden that creates beauty, but also incorporates a way for food for butterflies and bees and birds along the way. You don't want to also forget about the beneficial insects and, you know, how the cycle progresses. This is Achillea or yarrow. It's great in sandier soils, but we've grown it in clay soils, so it's very adaptable to many situations. Lupine, I wanted to just talk about. The wild lupin generally grows in sandier soils. I saw some wild lupin growing on Crescent Avenue on the state park side where the dog walking area was. And it just grows beautifully, but it's very short, the wild lupin is, and it grows in sandy soil. But if you think of the varieties of lupin that are cultivated, they don't always do well in sandy soil. They like the richer soil and more compost and clay, and they tend to proliferate. So sometimes the plants are not created equal as far as the cultivars and the natives. So a wild lupin, it attracts the Carner blue butterfly, and in nature, I've seen it just fill a whole side, a whole field, and it's just beautiful. And some people say, oh, I have trouble growing lupin, and it might be just the soil condition for that type of plant. So some plants are a little bit more finicky, and then choosing the right lupin for the setting. Coreopsis. There are a variety of different types of Coreopsis. Coreopsis lanceolata is a native, and there are cultivars of that. The bright yellow one down below, let's see. I have a pointer here. I'm going to try to use that. Here we go. So this bright yellow is the Coreopsis lanceolata, and that self-seeds readily. There are subspecies of that. And then this one is called Coreopsis moonbeam. So they're very easy to grow in the right setting. Coreopsis moonbeam grows fantastic in sandy soil to clay soil, as long as it doesn't have as much weed pressure. Coreopsis lanceolata, that grows well in, it will grow well in sandy soil, but sometimes if it dries out too much, it doesn't continue to proliferate. So I found like a sandy loam to a clay soil, it seems to proliferate a little bit better. Let's see. I think I need to get rid of my spotlight here.
You can also use your arrows.
Sorry. I'm having trouble like going to the next slide.
You can use your arrows
Okay, I got it now. It just froze up on me. Sorry about that. Baptisia australis, this is one of my favorites. It's a June bloomer. The foliage stays beautiful all season long. It just has a nice bushy effect to it. And then the June flowering, false indigo, it's just so strong as a flower. The part that I find, if it gets more sun, it stays upright and compact. There are gardeners that don't like it as much because they have strong irrigation. So they water a lot and it's a little bit shadier. So in those conditions, it can flop over more. But in drier conditions and full sun conditions, it will stay upright and beautiful. So sometimes it is finding the right location for your plant. And as the season progresses, the flowers form these black seed heads, which are also beautiful. And you could cultivate them and form new Baptisia from these little seed heads. Often in the spring, in February, we start a lot of our little tiny seedlings from, you know, it's annuals, perennials, vegetables, a variety of different things. But the perennials are one of the first ones that we start because they take the longest to actually germinate and form into a larger plant. But I find Baptisia is easily seedable. So it's worth a try if you want to try to seed some of your plants. Make sure they're dry and save them in a paper bag over the winter, and they'll save really well. Salvia, this is a cultivated variety. You know, the wild ones are, you can find them, but not as easily. This variety is May Night, and this is the white salvia. I love both of these. They just have a nice June, July presence in your garden before a lot of other flowers start to blossom. Heliopsis, false sunflower. This is another one that I love because it blooms in June and it continues through the season. It does tend to get some aphids along the way if you're not careful, so you just have to keep an eye on that. But the bees, the hummingbirds, like I've seen so many insects and wildlife on these plants that I think they're a fabulous plant to add to your garden. This is a garden that is in front of our greenhouse, and it has a few natives in here, and like the purple coneflower, echinacea, purpurea, and the heliopsis, summer sun. So many of the plants that we've grown have been nativars, so cultivars of the true native. And we also have some phlox in here too. I wanted to talk about echinacea a little bit because echinacea tends to be known as a native. Echinacea purpurea, there's a variety of different ones that are true natives, but there's also nativars. So this one is a little bit, this is powwow wild berry, and it has a deeper, darker pink to it, but the center of the flower is very much like the original coneflower or echinacea, purple coneflower. And then you have doubles. So this is hot papaya, and it's beautiful, but it doesn't always attract as many of the wildlife as the true echinacea. So sometimes as you get nativars, cultivars of the true native, you'll have some wildlife, I guess, some of it's compromised as far as the benefits to the flower. So the double flower, the bees and the butterflies can't get into it as much as the true purple coneflower. There's still a lot of research being done on that, and I find it interesting to find out more and more information. There's always so much more to learn in horticulture. I love every part of it. This is a close-up of the Powwow wild berry. I love this one. It's a little bit shorter than the wild Echinacea purpurea, and it stays upright really nicely. Geranium, these are a couple different cultivars of the native Biocovo and Roseanne geranium. So the benefits attracting the bees and the butterflies are still there with a lot of these plants, and super easy to grow. Gaura lindheimeri. This is in the Onethera family. It's a little bit south of here as far as being native, but it blooms all summer long, and it's just gorgeous in the garden. Anise hyssop. This is the true native, and I find it self-seeds readily and proliferates in lots of different places. The bees just smother the flowers on here, and the butterflies love it as well. Helenium autumnale. We've grown this in the past, and we haven't grown it recently, and I think it is a fabulous flower to grow because it grows about 4 to 5 feet tall generally. There are some shorter cultivars that you could get, but the bees, the butterflies, they just love the pollen that they can get off of the top of that. And it comes in multiple different colors, from reddish orange, variegated, yellow, and it's a nice, I would say, August, September bloom, so it's later in the season. So think about what you're planting and what are they going to benefit as you plant these certain plants and perennial shrubs, trees. Think about the habitat for birds. Birds also control insects. They help with pollination. They help with seed dispersal, and obviously it's beautiful to watch with the birds out in your yard. Creating the butterfly habitats, creating flowers that will attract them as much as possible. So adding, there's a picture of this monarch butterfly on the milkweed. You know, monarchs are so prevalent. They're most visible, I think, of all of the butterflies in my garden. And they just make you smile every time that you see them. So, I mean, that's what is wonderful about seeing the wildlife in your garden, not just seeing the beauty of the flower, but the whole picture. Like, what is happening there? Like, look at the bees pollinating. What are they doing? They're making honey, like they're making food. So it's interesting to think about it from all the way from a seed all the way through the cycle of what the benefits can be from what you plant to what you're helping in nature. Asclepias tuberosa, butterfly weed. It's funny, this is one that I always have a hard time saying butterfly weed, because I never think of it as a weed. I always think of it as, wow, this is an amazing plant in our garden because it stays in its clump. You can really see the plant, and the butterflies, they're attracted to it. Hummingbirds are attracted to it. And the larvae start eating the leaves, but you don't even notice really that they're starting to eat the leaves. I feel like it kind of blends in because the flowers kind of take off, and they're so prominent in your garden. So it's a great cultivated plant, and I've never seen it in the actual wild, but I know that it grows in sandy soil to clay soil. It's very versatile in soil areas. And then you have a lot of different types of Asclepias. You have the common milkweed. You have Asclepias incarnata. All of the milkweeds help in lots of different butterflies larvae. So if you can incorporate a couple different varieties, the common milkweed, that one has more of a spreading root. So you have to put it in a spot that you're like, oh, okay, this is fine because it's going to spread in an area that I'm okay with. And the Asclepias incarnata or Asclepias tuberosa, that stays in its clump. So it'll stay in its clump. You'll see the actual plant. You may have some self-seeders nearby, which are okay. You can transplant those out and move them to another area, or let them just naturalize right where they're at and have it a bigger mass of butterfly weed for the butterflies. This is one that was also new to me. I didn't really know about it when I first was gardening, and I thought I saw it in bloom in somebody's garden, and I said, what is that? I have to have it. It's called Veronicastrum virginiana, and this is very tall and upright, probably 4 to 5 feet tall, and it blooms in July. So it's a little bit, I would say, after the white Veronica, and then before like Chalone or Turtlehead. So it's kind of that middle of the season. It kind of blooms with phlox, and it's just gorgeous. But I just took this picture last week, and I'm like, it's still blooming. So sometimes you get like the benefit of multiple blooms, but the certain butterflies will lay their eggs on the Veronicastrum as well. Rudbeckia, fantastic for the butterflies, the bees, all of these cone type flowers with the centers that are very open. The pollen is readily accessible. The more that the bees and the butterflies, to make it easier for them, the more they're going to come. So this is Goldstrom Rudbeckia, Rudbeckia fulgida, and there are a ton of different varieties of Rudbeckias that will benefit and increase pollen count in your garden. Rudbeckia triloba, brown-eyed Susans, these grow a little bit taller than the Goldstrom Rudbeckia. This is probably 4 to 5 feet. My friend Lisa tuned me into this one. I hadn't grown it before, and she gave me a little plant, and it just took off in my garden, and it started self-seeding. So be careful where you put it. It will proliferate readily. But I love it. It's beautiful. This was right now. And I planted it next to Baptisia australis. So you have a June bloomer that's more bluish purple, and then a later bloomer that is yellow. Lots of different kinds of Rudbeckias and Helianthus. If you want to get some height in your garden, 5 to 7, 8 feet tall, these perennial sunflowers, Rudbeckias can give you that height, and you can go with the native varieties. Joe Pye weed, I always knew it as Eupatorium, but they change names of different plant material along the way. So sometimes you have to look and find the right name. It sounds similar to Eupatorium, what they changed it to. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. But this is Joe Pye weed in full flower. And then this is Joe Pye weed in flower, but it's past blossom. So you want to think about, okay, this is benefiting the butterflies and the bees, and the foliage is actually benefiting. The butterflies will lay their larvae on there. They'll eat the leaves. So this is a plant that you'll often see lots of holes in the leaves, but the flowers still stay beautiful. And then it turns to brown seed heads, which is also beautiful in fall. And it also provides, as it falls to the ground, it provides nesting for larvae that would fall to the ground. So there's other benefits as well as it ages. And you can proliferate if you want to incorporate the Joe Pye weed into a natural setting. These seed really easily. So you could get an area to naturalize a lot faster. And just a quick note, if you wanted a on the cheap way to like incorporate more natives in your garden, like take one of the seed heads from one of your plants that you only have one of and incorporate it into another area. It could be the Rudbeckia, it could be the Joe Pye weed, the summer sun heliopsis. Like a lot of them will germinate really readily. So people are talking about, I want to put in a wildflower meadow and I want it to attract the bees and the butterflies. And it's an easy way to, a less expensive way to incorporate more wildflowers. And it's worth a try, I think. The grass next to it is switchgrass, Panicum Dallas Blue. And panicums are native to our area, and there's many different varieties. I have another picture of a panicum I'll show you in a minute. Asters, New England aster, there's a lot of different varieties of asters that you're seeing right now that are in bloom, and they just add a lot of color to your garden. I don't tend to plant these in my garden because they do self-seed so readily. And maintaining your garden, you have to figure out what you're maintaining and what you're not maintaining, what you're naturalizing. So it's finding the purpose of your garden and where it is that you can let things naturalize. Viburnum opulus americana, American cranberry bush. We have some of these planted in our backyard, and the blossoms in the spring are white and beautiful and showy. And then they form these beautiful berries. So those the birds, I was surprised to see them because usually the birds just scoff them right up, but there must be a lot of food out there for them because this was the perfect picture I took just this week. Fothergilla is another native. It's in the witch hazel family. As it starts to turn cooler, the foliage starts to turn this brilliant reddish, but it changes. Fothergilla is kind of funny because it sometimes is more yellowy and orangey and reddish. So it kind of changes as the season goes. So think about those seasonal characteristics and what you want to see in your garden. You want to plant for the wildlife and the bees and the butterflies, but you also want your garden to look beautiful. So this is going to bloom in early spring, a little white flower, and then in the fall, it turns brilliant colors. In the summer, it doesn't really do much except for the leaves are more green. So having it next to a plant that's more spiky, like iris or even the Veronicastrum, the leaf texture next to other plants is going to set off other plants so they're not blending all together and what is what kind of thing. So as you put like larger leaves next to finer leaves, things will stand out and they'll still have their space and they won't get lost in your garden. Clethra alnifolia, another native. The leaves on these stay beautiful all season long. Same with the Fothergilla. You can see no insect damage, just gorgeous, and they're a July bloomer, and they smell so sweet. Miracle Pennsylvanica. This is another one that they changed the name on me. I have the original one that Miracle Pennsylvanica can be looked up as that name as well. So this one gets little buds on the stems. Right here you can see some nodules coming out, and they usually are a little bit more pronounced in the spring as the leaves start to come out. It's technically an evergreen, but I find in our area they often lose some leaves and the new leaves will come out. They get frosted, and it just seems like our area, they just don't stay as evergreen as I would like them to. Nine bark, Physocarpus. This is another one that is a nativar of the original nine bark. The original nine bark is green in color, so this is called summer wine, and the dark foliage is so beautiful, but it still has the same benefits, a lot of the same benefits as the green nine bark, because it has nesting areas. So you can see how dense it is in the center, and the birds can nest in the inside of that shrub, as well as I would say May, June, it starts to flower. So that when it flowers, it's like a whitish flower, pink buds, just gorgeous in the spring. So you have different characteristics throughout the season that make it an interesting plant in your landscape. And then this is the other panicum that I wanted to show you. This one is called Shenandoah, and the leaves turn more reddish as the season progresses and it gets cooler nights. So the seed heads are very airy and light, but they blow in the wind and they create such interest within, and the birds love to eat the seeds. So ornamental grasses are kind of fun to incorporate into your garden, as long as they're, I guess, accenting other plants, and figuring out what it is the purpose of your garden is. Maybe it is that you want an all grass garden, and you're just feeding the birds and you're proliferating that way. I tend to go with different textures together. You can see the broad leaf of the nine bark next to the spiky leaf of the panicum. It just looks so beautiful together. Ilex verticillata, winterberry. So these are just starting to turn red in the landscape, and the birds absolutely love them. The flowers are very inconspicuous, and the shrub doesn't look that interesting, I guess, in the early spring, and early spring and summer. But then when the berries start to turn red, it's just so worth it to have that starting in the fall and then going all through the winter until the birds eat all of the berries. But that is also the purpose of them. Itea virginiana, another one that has a white flower on it. It stays a little bit lower, but it'll grow a little bit more in the shade. It's very adaptable to many situations. And then as the fall comes, the foliage turns a brilliant red. So a lot of people want to plant burning bushes, which is an invasive species. So that is a nice alternative to burning bush, as well as the nine bark. You can see this was the picture I took before, but the summer wine nine bark, the Itea, having like alternatives to some of those invasive species that are out there is a nice thing to know. And I would say burning bush are very well known, because people see it, the bright red color, and they're like, oh, I love that. But I'm always like, well, it's up, and now you can't really plant it. So I try to offer different varieties of natives, mostly, that will offer some of those same characteristics. So native plants, they create a healthy ecosystem, wildlife habitats. Think about food and pollination. And when you're designing your own garden, are you going to incorporate just a couple natives in an area where you want more bird activity, more butterfly activity, maybe more bees in the area? Think about the space that you're designing. Is it a totally new space? Like maybe you can incorporate all natives, or maybe you want to incorporate some nativars, so you have like the pops of color in different areas that give you a longer bloom season, or just figuring out what is the purpose. And maybe it's to feed yourself. Maybe you want to plant more blueberries, and blueberries are native as well, and the foliage on those also turns brilliant red in the fall. So think about your soil type as well, how much light you have, and like where it is that you can really incorporate a sense of nature in your garden that just brings a little bit of the wow factor, but also benefits the whole ecosystem itself. I think many people think about, how do I incorporate easy maintenance? I don't want to work in my garden as hard as I used to. So how do I like reduce some of that, that labor as I go forward? So I wanted to show you this picture because I love this combination. This is Annabelle arborescens. They turn green in the fall, in July through the rest of the season. Sometimes they get more brown if they're in more sunlight, but they're a brilliant white when they first start in June. And then the next flower here to bloom would be the black-eyed Susans, the Rudbeckia, and then Chalone or turtlehead. Chalone is also a native. I have not seen the pink in the wild, but I've seen the white, and it's mostly grown in wetland areas along riverbanks and areas that it has endless supply of water. But I have found that Chalone is so easy to grow. It grows in the shade, to sun, and wet or dry, so easy, and it blooms this time of year. And this was also a picture that was just taken, so you can see that these are still in bloom, the black-eyed Susans. The Chalone is still in bloom. The Annabelle hydrangea is still giving me color. So that's a fall look that I sometimes don't have in other sections of the garden. So think about what is blooming at different times, and what kind of plant do I need to add to this area to give me color or more beneficial properties. This is still attracting the bees, the butterflies, the hummingbirds. The hummingbirds love the Chalone. They get right in there. And so do the bees. The bees are funny because they disappear in there. And you wonder, what are they doing? Anyway, it's fun to watch. So, and here's another picture of Chalone and the Annabelle hydrangea. And this is Actea or Simisafuga, another native that blooms right about now. So it's very late, but it gives you, I don't know, it's almost like a sense of mystery, like everything is starting to go downhill. And then this shows up. It's just so striking because of the pink buds and then the white flowers. And it stands about, I would say, 5 to 7 feet tall. And it's a little bit unique because people don't think about Actea early in the season. They think, because you can't see it in bloom in the pots, you have to kind of know about it in order to incorporate it into the garden. Or write it down for the next season to make sure that you put it in the spring so you have beautiful flowers going forward. This is another picture of our garden in midsummer. You have the Annabelle hydrangea, hydrangea arborescens, which is also a native, Anise hyssop, and different kinds of phlox. These are mostly nativars, so it would be cultivars of the native. I have kind of a variety in here as far as, like, the zebra grass is not native. But you can kind of tell, like, the Anise hyssop, the hydrangea, the phlox. Over here we have the Dallas blue before it comes into bloom, and then over here is the tall Rudbeckia that offers like some height and color in the garden. Another garden that has some natives incorporated, the purple coneflower. Let's see, I can't quite tell. Tradescantia can be a native, or iris, the blue flag iris, and that would also be in that color scheme. Some Rudbeckias, some phlox, panicum, This is kind of a new garden with a few natives incorporated into it. So it doesn't look as lush and full yet, but you have to think about, okay, it's going to fill in and it's going to be beautiful as I go forward. So sometimes you can get smaller plants for less money and incorporate some unique plants into your garden, and then they fill out, and it just takes a year for them to be big and beautiful. Another garden, Annabelle hydrangeas, bee balm, rudbeckia, echinacea, all natives in this little section. Coreopsis zagreb, Coreopsis verticillata, like all natives that look beautiful in July. Think about also trees and shrubs. So here we have Cornus florida. Cornus cusa is another beautiful white tree that could be incorporated, that gives you a wow factor as well as being native. So the birds, the butterflies, the bees, they're all loving this. And then we have viburnums that bloom just after the dogwoods. So you can see that you have multiple seasons of characteristics of flowering. So dogwood, viburnum, and I believe this might be the pagoda dogwood that blooms just after. And then this is a garden, a yard that has trees around the outside, but different flowering trees that will give you the benefit of having the birds and the butterflies come and stay in your yard because they're blooming at different seasons. And it's not just one plant that, oh, I love this native and I'm going to incorporate it, but then you have no food for the butterflies and the bees like later on. So you want to make sure that you have multiple different things that will feed our nature going forward. This has some non-natives like the Japanese maple, but think about the coloration. If you were to put this into all native plants, you could do the Physocarpus, the 9-bark, as a dark foliage instead of the Japanese maple. So there are options to change the choices that you love a Japanese maple, but maybe you can go with a 9-bark instead. Or that's just one example. So you can see here we have different foliage characteristic. This is out in nature where the colors are changing. The birches are turning yellow, the maples are turning reds and oranges. You have the understory that hasn't quite changed yet, but this is like what you're enjoying outside and opening your eyes and seeing it all, and then incorporating what do I love about outside and how can I incorporate it in my yard. Same here. See all the big rocks and boulders, and then you have a stand of hemlock and white pine. So you have some of that evergreen and texture. This is a river birch. The foliage on the bark is really pretty. It's not flowering, but it is beautiful. It has different characteristics that are beautiful. And this is a larger portion of that river birch. And the more you prune up, the more you can see the stems and enjoy that feature. And then we put some rocks around the base to make it feel a little bit more natural and like you would see in the wild. So sometimes recreating some of those spaces. And a lot of this is a driveway that has stones on it. You know, like a lot of our design features are based on what we have seen in the wild. We have hemlocks here, kind of like that other picture where it was hemlocks and white pine and then boulders in front. This kind of reminds me of it, but maybe a little bit of color needs to go in here. And then here you have like rocks and trees that have fallen and the grass, the yellows of the grass, the whites of the birch coming up. So sometimes it's just structure and leaves and texture all together, a little water feature. But, you know, if you see all these stones at the base, This also has stones at the base, but then create like a finishing touch in that section. And that could also be turned into all native plants in that area. This is more of a wetland plant. This is pitcher plant. I haven't really focused on wetland natives. There are a lot of different ones that could be incorporated. It's just finding the right setting. That's probably another talk we'll have to go with. Okay. And then another, I just wanted to point this out, red foliage of the maple, and the gray dogwood is starting to change. You have blueberries on the base that are going to be bright red pretty soon. The rocks as another focal point, the water, the evergreens, and the trees that haven't changed. So looking at it almost like an artist palette. One of my friends also said, every time I go out for a hike, I think of a painting. And I thought, oh, you know what? As a painter, you would think of it like that. And I thought that was so interesting because it's kind of like she thinks of it as a palette and what she could paint. I think of it as what I could paint in the ground as plants. And like everybody has their different view of how nature should be interpreted. And you can interpret it in however you want to in your yard. I wanted to also incorporate this because you could see that there's a lot of water, and birds and butterflies and bees, they all need water as well. This is just a picture I dug up that I thought it was fantastic to think about, because you can incorporate just a saucer with a couple stones, some sand, some little rocks, and a little bit of water. And that also creates water for butterflies in your garden, or birds, or, you know, even the bees will rest on that and just get a little drink before they go and pollinate. A pond also offers that, you know, some of the edges the butterflies can still reach and get a little drink. So think about all of the aspects. There's plants, but there's also other parts of the ecosystem that you want to think about in your yard. Another native plant, almost native plant garden, the echinacea, the black-eyed Susans. You have milkweed in here, and there's the pods of the milkweed. Beautiful. And it just kind of gives you an idea of different colors along the way that you can incorporate native plants into the section. I would probably take out this burning bush and put a 9-bark there, but that's just me. So this is one of our maps of what you could do for a native perennial garden. It has a couple different ideas of short flowers at the base, and medium flowers, and then tall flowers. And this gives you an idea of where you could plant them, and some ideas: Gaillardia, Lobelia, Iris, Tradescantia or spiderwort, Rudbeckia, Alchemilla, Echinacea, Phlox, Monarda, Eupatorium, Baptisia, and Helianthus. This is all incorporated in this garden that can create a native plant garden, but it also can be a pollinator or butterfly garden because of the plants that are used in this space. This is all perennials, but you can incorporate certain shrubs to make it complete. So this is offered on the slideshow. You can easily access it through the recording that hopefully the recording will be up this week. And a front picture of that same garden, just a little color just to show you what it could look like: small, medium, large. There's a lot of different perennials out there. This is just a dappling of some true native perennials that you could incorporate. Some native grasses, some native shrubs, and this was just the sources of where you could find a few of the different materials that I'm talking about today. So I appreciate you joining me today for native plants. I know there's probably lots of questions. Again, my name is Suzanne Balet-Haight from Ballet Flowers and Design, and feel free to visit us at our greenhouse, and we can help you with some of the native plants or just talk through some ideas. And there's a lot to native plants, and it's just taking a little section at a time and figuring out what's right for you. So thank you for joining me today.